Well, one final time, Brad. We can't let you go without chatting here. WSAU, WSAU.com. Mayor's Monday segment, but what do we care about the title? Because well, you're almost done.
I'm almost done. Thank you
Almost
for the
done.
invitation.
Yeah.
I'm glad to speak to your listeners.
Yes, absolutely, and glad to the listeners, your constituents, your bosses, whatever you want to call the people of Marathon County. It's certainly been 30-some years here. You've called this building home or office in one form or another, and tomorrow night, that's it.
Actually, not Monday night.
Monday night. There we go. Yeah,
right
Monday
to the
night.
end of the year.
Right
But
to the
we're
end
off
of the
on New
year.
Year's Eve.
Yep.
So I got a couple more days to wrap up some loose ends and clear out my office and make room for the next administration.
Yes, absolutely. And as far as your time here has gone, just kind of tell us again about it. 'Cause you started in the HR department.
Actually, if you think about it, it's a 30-year increment.
Yeah.
A decade as HR director, a decade as deputy county administrator, and 11 years as county administrator.
And in that time, what have you learned throughout those 3 decades?
Well, I've learned that this is really a good community with a lot of good people who've chosen the public service as a path they want to follow and trying to build a stronger community. We've become a stronger community in between time, socially and culturally, economically. We're stronger now. I think there are some weaknesses that we need to always pay attention to because there are always transitions in industries that are strong. And dairy's not going to come back in the way it was before. Paper industry isn't coming back the way it was before. Insurance industry isn't coming back the way it is before. We're now into heavy metal manufacturing and professional services and healthcare, and that'll change too. So we got to always be attentive to that because jobs mean prosperity for people, for industries, and without that kind of prosperity, this community will wilt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no doubt about it. You mentioned a lot of industries there, and these things, like you said, they are cyclical. So you, as somebody who's in leading the county, you always have to be set up to try and be a step ahead or ahead of the curve, as they say, in something like that. Do you think you're leaving the county in better shape like that?
Well, I'm confident we are in better shape. We're more financially challenged than when I became the administrator. The long-term impact of levy cost constraints imposed on us by the state have gone just a little bit too far, and they need to be loosened up. We've now made reductions in things that we need, and it's really pushed us out of paying with cash for things that are really maintenance, and now we're actually borrowing for resurfacing county highways and stuff like that, which just adds an extra cost. It's not saving anybody any money. It's an illusion.
Yeah, absolutely. Because in things like that, you're accruing interest, and what you're paying isn't exactly what you're getting out of it in return.
Right. We're getting less for more cost, and that's just not what was intended. The intent was to scale back government to really make a cold assessment of what difference between needs and wants, and we have done that well. In Marathon County, we're probably in as good a shape financially as any of the 72 counties. Our debt is extremely low. We have a plan for the debt that we have. Our operating costs are competitive with everybody else. We have a good, well-motivated, well-qualified workforce. In many ways, we're in great shape. But the future is uncertain. It's going to require good leadership. It's going to require futuristic thinking.
Mm-hmm. And I know one thing that you are kind of proud that you've done throughout your tenure as administrator. When we talked to you back in January, I believe it was, right after you made the announcement, you said was one of the things that I've taken pride in for the last 10 years is kind of looking ahead and trying to put the county in better shape. What are some of those key highlights throughout your tenure that you're really proud of?
Some of the projects that might not have happened. Most probably would have happened no matter who was the leader. But one for sure that required a good team effort was the location of what I call the theater at UWMC, which is really the Center for Civic Engagement at UW Stevens Point, Wausau now. Mm-hmm. And but when I took over that project as deputy county administrator, it was slated to go in Marathon Park. And if you think about how big that building is and how much parking it requires, just think of what a terrible idea that was. Luckily, certain citizens put up a fuss, and we came to our senses, and then we had the difficult job of purchasing, I think it was 32 homes, privately owned homes, one at a time. No eminent domain, all arm reach sales with the threat of eminent domain. I don't want to kid yourself. They knew they had to go. But we worked our way through that and put the building where it needed to be, which really added to the campus and really gave the campus much more visibility than it ever had in the past. That's one. The other one that I inherited was the soccer fields, East Bay Sports Complex. When I took over that project, it was stalled out. It was going nowhere with the DNR certification. It was going nowhere. The money was there with the private people would put money in for the cleanup, but the county wouldn't take ownership. The city wouldn't take ownership. And I went and met with the city people, and they said they wanted to take ownership. Next thing you know, the mayor vetoed that. Our county people didn't want to take ownership because they didn't understand what kind of pollution liability they were taking. We took a steady process, working hand in glove with DNR, even though there were times where I thought DNR didn't want this to happen, or at least some of the people we're working with. But eventually we had a meeting of the minds. The board understood the risk that it was taking, and understood the opportunity it might pass up otherwise, and we have a beautiful facility, and the pollution liability is well managed. I think it's really an asset to our whole county, and I'm glad that it's a county project. Some of the other things that I'm most proud of is really the culture here. We started to measure culture within the county. We know that engaged employees produce about 30% more than disengaged ones. And we can't afford to lose 30% of productivity around here. So we had to learn more about this and apply what we learned. And we went from, it's a percentile scale ranking us against other employers who take that test. We were in the 5 to 10% range at the beginning on everything. And now we're at the 60, 70 percentile on everything, which really shows a marked improvement. That people feel like they're respected, that they have the tools to do their job, the information to do their job, and that we're working together well as a team. And so those are 3 accomplishments that come to mind right away.
And those, of course, goes hand in hand with workforce, because you've got to have the best people. If you can't pay them, exactly up to or exceeding market rate, you've got to try to keep them there by creating a great work environment. And I know that's something that obviously when you're talking about cutting budgets is a challenge to the county as well.
Right. One of the things we did too here since I became implemented was implement a pay for performance system. And one of my regrets is we've never had enough money to really accurately fund that. So when we have a 2% overall pay increase, the differential I can give to top performers and those that are performing at a medium level is just not enough. But we've managed to make it work. But someday, I'm hoping that there's enough adequate funding, it's a high enough priority that we get that system up and running. Because, all turnover is not bad, but we don't want to turn over your top third. Those are the people that make or break you. We got to make sure we retain those people and reward them well.
And of course, so when you're talking about levy limits and things like that, there's a lot of aspects of that are beyond your control, but it's still something that you have to manage at the state level. If you can't get it changed, you at the very least have to manage it.
Yeah, we have to manage at the local level. I've always said to people here, someday I want to be up higher on the hill. I don't want to be up by, I've already been on the bottom of the hill where stuff rolls down and then I have to deal with it. We'll be up at the bottom and start rolling some boulders downhill once in a while, but it never works out that way. We always have to, at the county level and at local government level, we deal with what the hands were dealt. And we do pretty well. You know what, not just our county, but our municipalities, we all do pretty well. We have our days, we have our errors, but nobody expects anybody to be perfect around here. What they expect is that you learn from your mistakes and commit not to doing that again.
One of the other things you brought up in there was the battles with the city of Wausau over the East Bay Sports Complex that you had to get yourself into the middle of. And of course, you had another battle recently with one of your municipalities in the town of Red Mountain regarding readdressing. I know that's a dirty word to you these days, and to everybody in the county, but of course it's done and over with. But one thing that you've always had to manage there is what you call disputes among friends.
Right.
Another thing that we've talked about in these updates. How did you find it was the best way to manage that?
Well, the best way to manage it is, you don't control anybody else, you just control yourself. And you don't decide if people trust you, you just choose to trust them. And the people of Red Mountain are not our enemy. They're part of Marathon County. We have a dispute. Let's just leave it as a dispute, not make it bigger than it is. Let's not personalize it. I think anybody who was in my chair would have done the same thing. I think anybody who was in the chair of Galen Roden would have done exactly the same thing, given the community response. And let's just accept whatever happened and go forward. If you personalize issues, it just becomes something bigger than it needs to be. And it has coattails into other issues which do not serve the people of Marathon County well.
Absolutely, because that's what you're here for in this business. It's what we're here for at WSAU. We've got to serve these communities, right?
Right.
Absolutely. Well, as we, kind of look forward ahead, we know Lance Leonard is going to be at least sitting, if not in this office, in the chair in the interim.
Right.
And we have a national search underway
Yes.
for your replacement as well. What can you say about that process?
Well, I can tell you there's a task force led by our county board chair, Kurt Gibbs, and there's a number of community members a part of that, an oversight process, that there will be, I'm told, a diverse group of people conducting the first interviews. Second interviews will go before the executive committee. The executive committee will align on a candidate, bring them forward to the county board, which sounds like a lot of input. Half the county will have some input at some point. And then the county board will have the opportunity to adopt or accept a nomination and negotiate a contract.
And that's all going to be taking place over probably the first 3 or 4 months of the new year, is that
Yes,
correct?
I would hope so. I would hope that this goes quickly. Now, the public will be involved because once they get down to 5 candidates, the law requires them to release the applications. And you and I know somebody on the media is going to ask for those.
Of course.
Because that's going to be good news cover. Actually, it has a detrimental impact on people applying, because if you're in a community, you got a job you like, you don't want to have everybody else read it in the paper that you applied somewhere else.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm a little mixed in terms of that, but at least they don't require you to release all of the names of all the people that are applied, which used to be the law.
Yeah, there is certainly a double-edged sword on that, but of course, as we in the media would like to say, that's people want to know what their tax dollars are being spent on. The candidates would say, well, we don't want our constituents to know that we're applying elsewhere.
It's a balancing act.
Yeah, it is a
and
balancing
I think
act.
the balance they have is a proper one. This is an important decision to our county. The person who takes this job doesn't really make the decisions. The county board makes the decisions. But it does have a big impact on what the county board thinks about, and in terms of laying out what are the issues, and it certainly informs the county board's decision, which is all a big part of this in terms of setting the future direction.
And again, you've publicly stated you've recommended Lance for the position.
Right. I think he's well qualified for the job. If it were up to me, we would, the board would just appoint him. But here's the bottom line: it's not up to me.
Right.
The board has made a decision to go with the task force, and I support their decision.
Absolutely, because again, a couple days from now, what do you care? This isn't your office anymore.
Right. I still care because I still live here.
Right.
This isn't my office anymore, and letting go of some of this is going to be a challenge. But I understand what needs to be done.
And one more before we let you go. Of course, obviously, everybody wants to know what's next. I know you've said you're hoping to maybe teach some college classes, and I know for sure you're heading down south for a while. Is that correct?
I'm going to be down in Florida for the winter, and I am going to. I haven't actually got anything lined up yet, but I would like to teach some college classes as an adjunct faculty, either leadership, public administration, or human resource management. I've had some experience with that in the past, and I still think I have something to contribute.
As well, we'll look forward to seeing what happens next with you. As always, we appreciate the time. We appreciate the transparency. It's always great to work with you in the media. We always have to have that relationship. And again, all the best as to what's to come next for Brad Karger after Tuesday.
Thank you, and to you and your listeners, I hope the best for you in 2020.
Absolutely. We appreciate the time, and again, look forward to seeing what's to come next.
Great. Thank you.